Hey, Jared, I couldn't hear anything.
Hello, you can hear?
That's
Perfect.
good.
All right, make sure you can share your slide.
Yeah, I can share.
Okay, good. All right, it is 10 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. This is the dissertation defense for Jared Grant, soon to be tenure track assistant professor at the Ohio State University. I think he has to put the "the" in front of it. They're really picky about that.
That's what I said.
Yes, and capitalize it. That is a capital. Jared is going to present a brief overview of his dissertation research first. And the support cohort here today, which I believe is the largest I've ever seen, and it's corrected, are welcome to enjoy that. When that is over, we will ask most people online and in person to leave so that the three professors on this committee can ask him difficult and probing questions until we decide we've had enough fun with it. And so that's sort of how this will work. So everybody gets to participate in this first part, and just a few of us get to participate after that. While anybody is technically welcome to ask questions, Jared probably doesn't really want most people to ask questions. Okay, all yours, Jared.
Cool. So thank you for everybody, person and watching virtually. So today I'm presenting my dissertation on food security, food accessibility, and trust. So food security primarily focuses on making sure healthy food is affordable for everybody. Food accessibility primarily makes sure it's available and accessible to everybody. Food security, there's pretty much research that showcases it exists and it's a problem, while food accessibility is deemed to, like food deserts, dispute on whether they even exist. And primarily it's because during the pandemic, food insecurity actually showcased higher rates because of existing policies that were deemed insufficient in determining the effects. So, my bad. One thing that's the reason, well, so one thing, the reason for this was because policies that were geared towards community engagement, that was deemed better at determining things such as like making sure these policies were better. And one main thing about community-centered strategies is they involve leveraging trust within the community. So you're gonna hear me say trust a lot through this. Trust can be defined as a positive expectation of other players' actions in a mutually beneficial agreement under a realm of uncertainty. And this primarily deals with things such as reputation or the concept of betrayal aversion, such as if I've been hurt in the past, I don't want to ever be hurt again. In the realm of food accessibility and food security, suppose we want to place a grocery store in a low food access area. If numerous people have seen this specific grocery store fail, these residents, they may believe that future iterations or this current iteration will not last because they lack trust. Because they lack trust in it, they will not adopt it or frequently. If the grocery store isn't, if people aren't going to it, grocery stores aren't making profits. Because it's not making any profits, it's forced to close. And if it's forced to close, the residents further distrust. See, it didn't last. That's creating a paradoxical cycle. So the focus on that specific situation created a variation of trust game. So a trust game pretty much is a game theoretic model that rationalizes how trust can impact the consumer's economic choices and payoffs. And it's been applied to numerous sections, but minimally applied in the realm of food insecurity and food accessibility. So what I'm about to go through is pretty much first showcase the theoretical game theoretical model. Then I conducted this game under complete information and incomplete information, which is called Bayesian, where you assign prior belief distribution. And I'm actually going to visualize the entire prior belief distribution for the game, and then perform prior elicitation, which is pretty much comparing the informativeness of priors. Then I'm going to showcase racial ethnic disparities in trust, meaning like I want to see how if different racial and ethnic groups pretty much can affect how successful a grocery store is opening in an underserved area. And overall, throughout the whole presentation, I'm going to provide instances that help policymakers provide place-specific insight into how food programs can better be functioned. And regarding the overall structure of my dissertation, my first major chapter was theory and pretty much showcasing the theoretical framework. Second one, application, where I include resident perception in Los Angeles using primary data. And then I merged this primary data with secondary data in order to find more information regarding like how we can better impact these areas or the likelihood of success. So getting into it, there's two players, residents and stakeholders. The residents represent the low-income food access community, and the stakeholders represent the cooperative agreement between the local government and the grocery store operator, and a conditional influencer. And you'll see what I mean here. This is the overall structure of the game. So first, the game starts off with the stakeholders deciding they want to open a grocery store in a low food access area. First decision they make is whether they want to involve an influencer or a popular or influential person to the residents that can compensate for the distrust the residents may have towards the stakeholder. Once they make that decision, the store opens and it's the residents' turn. The residents must then decide whether they want to adopt the store or don't adopt the store. Regardless of the decision, after some time's passed, typically when the lease ends for the store, the stakeholder then makes a decision whether they want to renew the lease and maintain the store's upkeep, meaning it's a quality store with fresh produce restocked, renew the lease and not maintain the store, meaning it's not a quality store, fresh produce is not being restocked, things of that nature, or simply close the store. Regardless of the choice, game ends, and you can see the different outcomes that can happen given the stakeholders or residents' choices. So as I mentioned earlier, I did these games under incomplete information as well, meaning there's two different types of each player. So the residence types is trust and no trust. The trust type is more likely to adopt the store than the no trust. With the stakeholders, their types differ based on the food assistance programs they offer. So for example, one is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Grant Program, which is SNAP, or this can be viewed as more the traditional attempt at opening a store, because the majority of grocery stores offer SNAP benefits or EBT. The Gus Shoemaker Nutrition Incentive Grant Program, or GUSNIP, is actually more rare, and it actually offers an immediate 50% discount on SNAP allowable foods. One con with this is that the funding only lasts for a set period of time. So in the game, the stakeholders' payoffs are primarily in terms of profit. In order to make sure that it was kind of like realistic, I actually consulted a grocery store operator that kind of like gave me estimates to estimate the cost of opening, maintaining, and things of that. So like remodeling the store increases gross sales by like 15 to 20%, but costs roughly that. So I want to make this game as realistic as possible. And I used the adjusted hoteling model to include that includes transportation and adjustment costs to figure out like healthy foods and prices for that. The residents are in terms of profits, payouts are in terms of utility or satisfaction. And the big thing I want to highlight with this is what I did was add a store trust score and up to the utility that I get from whatever grocery store I shop from. And this store trust score includes reputation or a conditional, like if the influencer is involved, influencer score, which can represent the number of followers or just how impactful the influencer is to me. I also want to make the assumption that I can't assume that the resident will totally frequent the store just because it's closer to them. There was a grocery store they shopped there prior. Because there was a grocery store they shopped there prior, they still may prefer that. They may not want to make the adjustment to this store. So what I included was a frequency share. And frequency share means that I shop at multiple grocery stores, but I get utility fully. So for example, I may shop at Walmart 50%, I may shop at Target 20% to get groceries, and I may shop at Kroger 30%. As long as I'm utilizing that sums to one and getting all my groceries, I can shop at multiple different places. The influencer represents, as I said, a conditional like partner for the stakeholder, and they pretty much can compensate for the distrust the residents may have. There's been numerous examples of this occurring, but the most famous one is probably like the Let's Move campaign, where former First Lady Michelle Obama had the Let's Move campaign that was geared towards combating childhood obesity through active movement. And in conjunction with that, Beyonce actually reworked one of her songs, Move Your Body, that was geared towards flash dancing and getting kids active. And through it, you can see in red the Google searches from that time. Let's move your bodies in red, and you can see a huge spike, and then there's a delayed spike when you look at let's move. This denotes the impact an influencer can have. So this is the game in normal form or traditional game theory. The big thing that I just want to highlight is I lumped up in the optimal outcome that can occur from this game, I'll call Nash equilibrium. And to make things easier, I showcased each outcome and labeled them as successful, sustainable, or unsuccessful, where if the store is maintained, it's a successful outcome, sustainable, store not maintained, and unsuccessful, store closes. So that's the big thing I'll highlight. And for the variations in the game, I conducted it under, like I said, complete information, meaning each player knows the other's type. One-sided incomplete information where there's 2 games, one for each stakeholder, where the stakeholder doesn't know if the residents are trust type, no trust type, it's more realistic. And then a 2-sided incomplete information game, which includes all 4 scenarios in one, meaning neither player knows the other's type. And this just kind of like showcases the outcomes that can occur. And for the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to showcase the one-sided incomplete information games because I use that throughout my whole dissertation. So these are the outcomes, or this is the games, and highlighted is the Nash equilibriums, meaning the best or overall optimal outcomes. Up top are the top row are scenarios where the residents are type trust. And what we can see is for the snap type of stakeholder, their best outcome is one where the residents adopt the store, but the store is, I'm not hiring an influencer and I do not maintain the store's upkeep. Versus the best outcome for the GusNIP is one where they don't hire an influencer and maintain. Meaning the GusNIP store has a more successful outcome, where the Snap store has a more sustainable. And this could be because the GusNIP store can afford to maintain the store given the immediate price discount they can afford to. What's interesting is if you look at the bottom row, these are scenarios where there's no trust type of residents. What we see is there's actually 2 Nash equilibrium, a positive, a successful one, and unsuccessful, and they're the same. Either I hire an influencer and maintain the store's upkeep and the residents adopt, or residents don't adopt and I close the store, no influence. And what this kind of showcases is why we may see some food grocery stores that are placed in underserved areas succeed and some don't. It's because if you have a no trusting type, either one can happen because it's optimal. This diagram showcases how it looks for the one-sided incomplete information game. So like I said, the stakeholders have no idea the residence types, so they assign a prior belief of alpha. And what I actually did was focus on showcasing the entire distribution from 0 to 1. So 0 represents complete no trust, 1 represents full trust. And I want to see how the Nash outcomes change as alpha increases. For the 2-sided incomplete information game, this is one where now both players have no idea. So the stakeholders assign a probability of beta. In this game, it's actually 4-dimensional, which interpretation can get muddy, but that's why I'm primarily focusing on one-sided incomplete information games, because in this case, it's more realistic that the stakeholder doesn't know if the residents are trust type versus it's unrealistic that the residents will know, like you can see if there's a media price discount, you could tell what type of store it is. So that's what I based the rest of my results on. So this table showcases the results for the entire trust prior belief distribution for the one-sided incomplete information game. The major thing I want to highlight is both the Snap type and GusNIP type have the same sustainable and unsuccessful outcome, but they differ on the successful outcome. The Snaps type's successful outcome has both residents adopting the store, and the stakeholder hiring an influencer and maintaining the store. Versus the successful outcome for the GusNIP type is one where you don't hire an influencer and maintain the store's upkeep, and the trust type adopted, but the do no trust don't adopt. So the successful type has a slightly better successful outcome, but they're both successful. And in the middle, you see like just range for the trust prior belief distribution, but I'm more visual learner, so I created violin plots that kind of like showcase what it means. So y-axis denotes the full trust prior belief distribution, ranging from 0 to 1. And highlighted in green, yellow, and red is successful, sustainable, unsuccessful. And what we can see is if I'm the Snap type of stakeholder, there's a clear overlap in outcomes. Meaning if the residents are trust prior belief like 15 or 20, it can be difficult to determine what the national outcome is, what store outcome I'm going to get. Versus, and this is primarily because their outcome requires them to hire an influencer. Because they hire an influencer, you wouldn't hire an influencer if you have high trust. You hire them if you have minimal or low trust. So that explains that. With the GusNet one, because they don't hire an influencer, there's a clear order. High trust, successful, and low trust, unsuccessful. And what this pretty much highlights is both have their pros and cons. It depends on how you want to operate. Another thing that I want to highlight is the shape of these. So these shapes are boxy. Them plots kind of like have a curve to it. The reason why these shapes are boxy and more uniform is because I performed under an uninformative prior, meaning each outcome is equally likely. And while this tells you that each of these outcomes are possible regarding the successful, it doesn't tell you how likely they are given a specific group of people or demographic. So what I did was perform prior elicitation, which focuses on developing and comparing prior belief distribution based on informativeness. And I based this informativeness from primary data and merged secondary data. And what this does is give me a likelihood of how each outcome can occur. And I performed multivariate regression analysis. Well, I wound up being the best because it predicts trust scores given independent variables that I use in the model. So I'm gonna break down the primary data that I used. So I conducted 2 online surveys in Los Angeles, or Metro Los Angeles area, and it focused on pretty much running through the game. Residents would ask questions about, would you adopt this store? What if an influencer involved? Pretty much run through what I went. I also asked demographic questions such as age and things of that nature, and if they believed they were food insecure or live in a low food access area, meaning their perception. The important part that I also added was a trust score, where I asked them questions, asked them rate from 0 to 1, how likely they are to trust in local government, trust in food access, but also trust in store quality. And I took the average of that to create a composite trust score. And this map that you see is the composite trust score for the area. I asked them questions regarding zip codes so I can map them up using GIS. And highlighted in blue, in dark blue is the high trust, and in yellow is low trust. So you could be in a zip code right next to another zip code and have totally different trust areas. This is important when you want to place a grocery store and understand the area. For the secondary data, I pulled from various sources, and all of it is on the census tract level, which is great. And I had food insecurity rates from the meal gap, a continuous food access measure that I actually crafted with Jeff Dorfman and Craig Gunderson. And I pulled from USDA American Census Survey, their racial/ethnic population shares, education, income, and household size. So I wanted to get a full like controls and understand how things move. So for the merge data, so what I did was I combined primary and secondary data using crosswalks and actually merged them. So I'm focusing on the secondary data that's in the zip codes or census tracts that are my primary data. And what this gives me is perceived food insecurity and food accessibility rates, secondary measures for food insecurity and food insecurity rates, and the primary trust scores as my dependent variable in my model. And then, like I said, I perform multivariate regression analysis to kind of predict where trust scores are in order to shape the distribution. Another thing I did, and this is like I said in the last chapter of my dissertation, was I wanted to see if ethnic or racial or ethnic populations differ on the successful outcome that can occur. So what I did was I filtered based on population shares, also plurality, meaning whichever's had the highest census tract in that census tract or highest population in that census tract. So this table pretty much breaks down the uninformative prior or the theory one and the informative priors from just primary data and merge data. To visualize it better, I also created the violin plot comparison that kind of showcase one better than the numbers. So here's the theory violin plots that I showed earlier. And what we can see is under informative priors, we can kind of see clear region, especially in Los Angeles, regarding where the trust outcomes can occur or where the successful outcomes opening a grocery store are, given the trust scores proceeds. And actually, the merge data actually showed the best, especially for the GusNip type, where we can see that, okay, for the successful outcome, it's primarily trust scores are at that level, you get a successful outcome. So more information, better outcome, better understanding on where to place grocery stores. This just showcases the density function, pretty much just showcasing the, like on the y-axis is the density, x-axis is the trust scores. This pretty much showcases where each outcome can occur, further proving that, okay, for example, for the SNAP type, we can see that the unsuccessful outcome typically in this population is about 25%, successful, a little less than 50, unsuccessful, sustainable, a little greater than that. And with the GusNip type, we can clearly find what the successful outcome is in this distribution. So kind of can clearly see how it is in Los Angeles. So, like I said, I was focusing on racial and ethnic disparity because I want to see if different racial and ethnic groups vary based upon how, like, if you want to open a grocery store in a primarily area. And so these shows regression results, coefficients for measures with the dependent variable under perceived food insecurity, food desert, or trust, but also the secondary measures. And the only thing I want to highlight is that when you look at specifically the stars are significant values. So you see a lot of stars regarding the racial, like different racial groups versus white, which is showcasing that there is a disparity. What this figure showcases, or this table showcases, is how different population sizes vary across like race, meaning there's a low population of this specific race in the census tract, average or high. And the big thing to highlight with this is that for primarily the other races and ethnic groups such as white, Hispanic, and Asian, they follow a similar pattern, but Black showcases a different one, where it's a little different. And to showcase that further, I want to focus on plurality, where plurality focuses on the race or population group that has the highest amount in that census tract. And what I found is in the data set, Black had the smallest plurality in my data set, but when I look at the outcomes that can occur when I filtered it, like such as focusing on the trust gains based upon the specifically data with between racial plurality, Black was the only one that showcased the highest successful / sustainable outcome for the SNAP type, but also there's a slight chance of unsuccessful compared to the other races. And what this kind of showcases is the importance of trust in African American communities, where you can't place a grocery store in an area just without communicating or involving an influencer or somebody to compensate for the distrust. If you do that, that's the highest chance that you have of being successful, pretty much making sure the store is maintained, hiring an influencer, and focusing on like quality of store. So that's the main thing, which was a great result to find. So in conclusion, pretty much what I said earlier, the big three highlights was that maintenance of a store's upkeep is important. Prices for healthy foods, such as the difference between SNAP and GusNip, can play a role in whether the store is successful, sustainable. But the most important thing is knowing the community and being involved. Using more from the most informative prior came from more data, where I know the racial group, education, age, things of that nature. So going into the community, understanding what's going on, can better aid in successfully determining the outcome and building trust within the community. And yeah, the major thing is, I know mentioned in the paper, focusing on leveraging trust within the community. It's also focusing on building trust, because the trust has to be gained authentically in order to maintain, in order to successfully open a grocery store. Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions? Look at that fast enough.
That was fine. Well, I said that we didn't really expect or want questions for the people who aren't on the committee. Where's Mom?
Oh,
Does Mom want to say anything?
oh, she can talk. You got something to say, Mom? You got mute?
Good morning. How's everyone doing?
You got a question, Mama?
No, I do not have any questions.
No, I just thought you might want to say something to Jared.
Oh,
Congratulations, Jared. I thought you did an awesome job. I'm here with your dad, and Nana is in the other room watching also.
Okay, so I do want to say, Dad, you should know that Jared's dissertation is probably the best idea for a dissertation any student I've worked with in 30 years has had. And it was inspired by you. The story you told him about a new grocery store that opened nearby and how it wouldn't last is basically how he came up for the idea for all this research.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. Yes, in our neighborhood, they put up a Food Lion was the store, and it did not stay open more than a year.
yeah, thank y'all. Thank you.
All right, I thank everybody who came out this morning to support Jared. And if you're here in person, you are certainly welcome to take more of the food on the way out. Some celebratory cupcakes.
Oh, well, those are mine. You can have some.
You have to have one.
Alright, and through Zoom, fortunately, everybody's like leave, so we're just.
Except Chad.
Except Chad. But thank you all for popping on Zoom, appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.